Welcome to Living Legacy Leadership, where we explore, discover, and share insights, tools, and strategies for a life well lived into elderhood. I'm your host, Donna Kim-Brand, author, speaker, legacy strategy coach, and creator of the concept Living Legacy, where you choose to live life on your own terms while contributing to people, places, and projects along your life journey. I believe that the life you live is the legacy you leave. Now, the guests I bring to you each week all address some unique aspect of learning, leadership, or legacy. This helps you raise your own game as a leader in business and life, and also showcases some extraordinary people who exemplify living legacy leadership. At least once a month, I also offer a training session to skill you in game changer thinking for your own application. So get your notebook ready or sharpen your memory by tuning in your attention, and we'll dive right in. Well, today just happens to be one of those days. You get me. And what I was going to share with you is looking at the question of what can we actually do about what ails our society and hurts our humanity. I'm sure you all know Maria Shriver, of course, the relative in the Kennedy family. Her mother was Jean Kennedy Shriver, and dad was Sergeant Shriver. She was married to Schwarzenegger for many years and First Lady of California. She's now running a foundation that has to do with women helping with Alzheimer's. Anyway, she made some recent observations that open a smorgasbord of possibilities that span a range of causes you could choose to support. And of course, people nowadays are riled up to protest and want to do something to make the world a better place. But the question is, how do you do it and what should we do? So that's where I'm going to share some simple processes for assessing options and making decisions in situations just like this. So you'll learn how to become a human pendulum, even trusting your own intuition to gain insight and get unstuck. So the reason I chose to talk about Maria Shriver today was because she published in her what she calls her Sunday paper, Maria Shriver's Sunday paper, a way to inspire hearts and minds and move humanity forward. So here's her story. I'm going to read you her story, then I'll share with you those ideas about how do you choose to make the choices as to where you invest your energy, your effort, your passion, your time, money, resources, everything. So here's from Maria Shriver. The other night, I was wide awake for hours in the darkness of my bedroom. It was that time deep in the night when it's so quiet that you can hear the creak in the floors and the sound of your own breath. I laid in my bed thinking about the last few years and what a roller coaster they have been. I thought back to the 2016 election night when I sat downstairs in my family room glued to the TV, stunned as the results rolled in. Then my mind jumped to the Women's March, to the Me Too movement, to headlines about the Catholic Church. My mind flashed in rapid succession to school shootings, marches for gun reform and climate change, images of chaos at the borders, Russia, the impeachment trial, all the president's men and their cries of fake news, the pandemic, unemployment, the murder of George Floyd and the protests that have followed, calling for police reform and to recognize that Black lives matter. And on Friday, the senseless death of Rayshard Brooks by a police officer in Atlanta. That's all in the last 3 years, and I know I'm missing a lot in between. I took a deep breath and said to myself, wow, that is a lot to digest. Today, headlines change in an instant. Once you're finally started to get up to speed on one story, it fades from the news and gets replaced by something new and different. It's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot in a little bit of time. As I lay there, I found myself thinking back to the moment I sat in the crowd at Barack Obama's inauguration in 2008. It was a day so filled with hope and aspiration. I remember it so clearly. I brought my children with me because I wanted them to witness what I thought was an extraordinary turning point in our country. I sat there in that crowd, naively believing that we were embarking on a new era of hope and bipartisanship and a new push for equality and justice. Now, here we are. At this moment, it feels less important to analyze how we got here, although frankly, it's critical to learn history so we don't repeat it, and more important to ask ourselves how we move forward. And again, I'm quoting from Maria Shriver's Sunday paper. I'm not suggesting we're in the healing phase at all, but we are at a juncture, and it's not as simple as a fork in the road. In a way, we're in a turnabout or an intersection, one with many roads, each one leading to a different institution in dire need of reform. They're all different in their own ways, but they're all connected at the center. So many people have said to me in the past few weeks that they feel helpless and they don't know what to do or say. I tell them what I tell myself. When you lay there in bed in the dark of night, imagine the country you want to live in. Imagine the leaders you want to rally around. Imagine the ideas that make you feel hopeful. Imagine your best case scenario. Then pick a lane and go to work. Do you want a better climate? Get to work. Do you want to fight against racism? Get to work. Do you want to push for gender equality? Get to work. Do you want to close the gap in healthcare disparities? Guess what? I'll tell you to get to work. And she invites you then to join her in the Women's Alzheimer's movement, or send her stories to cover on her beat at NBC News. She is a journalist. Do you want a different kind of media? Well, get to work at it then. Or join us here at the Sunday paper, where we believe media can be a force for good. Do you want criminal justice or police reform? New gun laws? Mental health policy? A more inclusive church? Better education? You know what to do. Obviously, get to work. Pick a lane and get to work. Now, the work ahead of us is not for the faint of heart. Every one of us must put on our thinking caps and imagine a more evolved, inclusive, and equitable world. Yes, there's a lot to do, but that's not an excuse to do nothing. We just can't throw up our arms and say it's too much or that nothing matters. Everything matters. You can't say there is no one out there who inspires you because there's so many inspiring people out there trying to bring about systemic change. Be one of them and join them. And by the way, what about becoming the person who inspires you? You become that person that inspires others. What about you becoming the person who leads? You can't just sit back and say, no, I'm just X, Y, or Z. I can't possibly be the one. Well, oh yes, you can. That's the inspiring part, even if it's also daunting. So if you feel like you can't catch your breath due to the dizzying pace of change these days, I feel you. If you're mad, exhausted, frustrated, I feel you. If you're someone who feels like the country is just too divided to get anything done and that change will never happen, I feel you. But I will also tell you that I don't feel like any of those feelings are an excuse to just sit back and watch Netflix. This is the exact moment, again quoting Maria Shriver, to sit down, close your eyes, and imagine the world you want to live in, the world you want to create for your children or leave for them. Don't tell me that your vision isn't attainable or realistic. Imagine it. Write it down. Then take personal steps towards getting educated. Take steps towards making your dreams a reality. Last Sunday, I went to a small protest near my home. This again is Maria Shriver speaking. People held handmade signs, wore masks, and stood 6 feet apart. I went alone, though my son Patrick joined me later. I picked up a piece of cardboard and wrote in the Sharpie, Mothers for Justice. It just came to me, probably thanks to my conversation last week with Sabrina Fulton, or perhaps from my conversations over the decades with so many mothers and people who mother in different and critical ways. I slowly went over and stood next to a man with a Black Lives Matter poster. At first, we stood there without talking, my mask firmly in place. His too. Then our conversation began, and before I knew it, we had talked about so much. We had so much in common. Rodney is a 52-year-old black man from Boston. He not only remembers busing, but he remembers being bussed until his mother put a stop to it. Rodney is now an editor at the local CBS news station here in Los Angeles. He's also the head of his local union, and he's one of 10 kids. And by the way, same mother, same father, he quickly made a point of telling me. Damn, I said as we both laughed. Rodney told me that he grew up with a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy on the wall in his home. He was told by his parents that both of these men were to be honored because they had worked hard to change people's lives for the better. Ironically, I also grew up with both men on the walls of my home, and my parents told me the exact same thing. Rodney and I talked for quite some time about the news business and the business at hand of changing lives. He said his mother would have been very happy that we met. This brings me to this, said Maria Shriver. Who are the people in the photos on the walls of your home? Are they photos of people who are trying to change lives, or simply photos of people living their own lives? No doubt when you look at the photos, you'll see yourself in many of them. What will be your story? What will your children tell their children about the people in the photos on the walls of your home? What will you tell yourself when you look at your own photo in life one day? So go ahead, grab a Sharpie, find a poster board, pick a lane. There are minds to change, hearts to open, and much more to be done. Get to work. Love, Maria. So, very heartfelt, of course, on her part. And, we know what she is a humanist as well as, has a very definite political persuasion. And yet she embraces change on the wider scale as well, and not just as a mother, but as a reporter and as a person who does care deeply. She said a couple things, like about the posters and pictures on the wall. In my house, yes, we had some of those photos as well, but we had the Dalai Lama and Albert Einstein, and Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who's a big hero of mine with his notions of reverence for life. But we also sprouted books. We had books everywhere, probably over 2,000 before I had to downsize when I recently moved. And so the kids were raised with books about all kinds of things, of course, biographies and people of historical impact and import. We also like to watch movies, both DVDs when they were popular, and then, of course, going to the movies to see historical movies and so on. But Maria also talked about picking a lane. And the thing is, for people who really care, I have a lot of friends, I'm an empath, but I have a lot of friends who are empaths who are paralyzed by not knowing what to do or which way to turn with which disaster or current issue to focus on. They want to put their energy everywhere, and then they can't run their business or run their life even in some cases. And so Maria's point of picking a lane and just choosing something and doing something can be really helpful. Now, in the creative process, it's, which I like to say is a fun process because you're creating things in many cases out of nothing, or creating something cool out of something, lesser than that. But I also use the acronym FUN, F-U-N, to describe moving through a creative process. And the F stands for focus, which relates to Maria saying pick a lane. In other words, she's saying pick the issue that's calling to you the most, that matters to you the most. And it's tough when you're well connected and you're caring about people. Everything hurts. But your skills or your interests or your stage of life maybe, or time available, or what's available in your